All right, let's get into it. When you think about a revolution, what comes to mind? Probably armies, right? Battles, weapons. But the French Revolution, well, it wasn't just fought with muskets. It was lit up by something way more powerful, something you can't really stop once it gets going, an idea. So we're going to explore the incredible social shifts and the big ideas that brought France right to the edge of a complete reinvention.
You know, Victor Hugo once wrote, "What's more powerful than an army? An idea whose time has come." And that quote, it really gets to the heart of what we're talking about with the French Revolution. This wasn't just people being angry about the price of bread. It was a complete change in how people saw the world, their own rights, and their role in society.
Now, here's the thing. France had a long, long history of people being unhappy. Revolts and protests, they were pretty common. But for centuries, something really important was missing, something that kept these uprisings from ever turning into a full-blown revolution.
For years and years, you'd see peasants and workers rise up. They were protesting crazy high taxes or the fact that they just couldn't get enough food. But these were reactions, you know? They were happening in small pockets, driven by immediate suffering. But they didn't have a unifying vision, a real blueprint for what could come next. They knew what they were against, but not what they were for. But then, in the 18th century, the whole game started to change. A brand new social class was on the rise, and these were the folks who would become the real engine for change. They had the resources and the vision that all those earlier revolts were missing. And if you look at our source material here, it lays this out perfectly. It points right to the emergence of what we call the middle class, a group that was getting wealthy and, this is the crucial part, had access to education and a whole world of new ideas. So who were these people exactly? The middle class, or the bourgeoisie, they weren't born into nobility, but they definitely weren't poor peasants either. They were making their money from things like overseas trade and manufacturing. And all this new wealth gave them some serious clout, while their education opened their minds to some really radical new ways of thinking. And just to put a face on it, we're talking about merchants managing huge trade networks, manufacturers making stuff like silks and textiles, and all sorts of educated professionals, think lawyers and government officials. The key thing to remember is they weren't just rich. They were organized, they were educated, and they were reading everything they could get their hands on. And that is a powerful, powerful combination. And this quote, wow, this gets to the absolute core of their new way of seeing the world. No group in society should be privileged by birth. Rather, a person's social position must depend on his merit. Just stop and think about how revolutionary that sounds. That one sentence basically took a sledgehammer to the entire foundation of French society, which was built on the idea that you were important just because of the family you were born into. So this new middle class wasn't just sitting around being angry about not having privileges. They had a vision, a blueprint for a totally different kind of society. And where'd they get that blueprint? From a group of incredible thinkers we now call the Enlightenment philosophers. They literally handed the revolutionaries their intellectual toolkit. And right here, our source text points to the big names who provided this very blueprint. We're talking about thinkers like John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and Montesquieu. These guys were putting forward some radical new ideas about how a government should even work. So let's break this down. You had John Locke, who completely refuted the idea that kings got their power from God. That alone blew up the main justification for having a king with absolute power. Then Rousseau comes along and talks about a social contract, basically saying that a government only has power because the people agree to give it to them. And then you've got Montesquieu, who gave them a practical plan, split the government's power into 3 branches: legislative, executive, and judicial, so no one person or group could ever get total control. And the craziest part? These weren't just theories anymore. Just across the ocean, the American Revolution was happening, and it was a stunning, real-world example. The U.S. Constitution was living proof that you could build a country based on these ideas, a country without a king, where citizens had guaranteed rights. For anyone in France dreaming of change, this was an absolute game changer. So you've got a new, ambitious class of people, and you've got this powerful set of world-changing ideas. The last piece of the puzzle is, how did these ideas get from the pages of some philosopher's book into the hearts and minds of millions of French people? How do they literally catch fire? Well, it happened like a chain reaction. First, the ideas get published in books and newspapers. Then, they're being fiercely debated in the salons and coffee houses in Paris, where all the educated folks would hang out. But And this is so important. It didn't stop there. People would gather in groups, and these books and papers would be read aloud, spreading these radical ideas about liberty and rights, even to people who couldn't read themselves. The fire was spreading to every single level of society.
Okay, so you've got a whole country just simmering with these new ideas and old frustrations. The final spark comes with the news that King Louis XVI is planning to impose even more taxes. Now, for a population that's been reading and talking all about their rights, this wasn't just another tax. This was the final proof that the whole system, the entire system of privilege, was fundamentally broken and unjust.
So I'll leave you with this question. What happens when a new idea meets a society that is absolutely ready for change? What is its limit? Well, the French Revolution is the answer. And it just goes to show you, when an idea's time has finally come, there's almost nothing that can stand in its way.